Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse from Sony Pictures is swinging into theaters right now. The numbers that it has already rung up in Thursday night previews and the numbers that it is continued to expect to ring up over the course of its opening weekend are big. And that's great news for Sony Pictures, not so great news for the Walt Disney Company and the hopeful second weekend for The Little Mermaid. Let's get into it. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back into the great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and turn that little red subscribe button to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Let's dive right in. This from Deadline Magazine back 2 days ago on May 31st. Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse looks to snare a $150+ million worldwide opening after a 5-year crawl to the screen. Now, initially, they're assuming about a $90 million 3-day weekend here, and I'm here to tell you that those numbers are going up at this point in terms of the estimates. But given their Wednesday projections, that would put it at about a $60 million overseas opening, including $20 million from China, which, according to the article, loves Spider-Man. The first animated picture grossed over $62 million there. That, of course, was back in 2018. The first Miles Morales movie opened in 2018 around the Christmas frame to $35 million in the U.S. and concluded its run at $190 million. That is a heck of a leg out for a film like that. It grew in popularity largely because it got very positive word of mouth, and that is bringing things into focus for this second movie. Now, obviously, there's no official data reported yet on the numbers, but there will be here in the next few days as the opening weekend commences. And we've already got Thursday preview figures, and we'll get to those in just a moment. But as you can see here, the original Into the Spider-Verse film from 2018 rang in at a $90 million budget, the new one coming in at a $100 million budget. Those are well-controlled budgets. These are animated pictures. That's about as much as they really should be. And when you compare that to other companies out there like Walt Disney in particular, where every animated feature that they have that comes to theater seems to show up with a $200 million budget, literally double what we're looking here. This is why Disney always has problems at the box office. Their movies just aren't that good anymore. And their budgets and their expenditures for marketing are so much higher generally than everybody else, it makes it very difficult for them to ever turn a profit anymore on their films. This one almost assuredly will. This film, once it gets to probably somewhere in the vicinity of around $350 to $400 million, depending on what Sony spends actually marketing this film, it's going to reach into profit territory, which I don't think this movie will have any problem, considering the first movie finished up at $375 million globally. This one, of course, it looks like that it's going to do almost 40% of that 2018 film's entire run in its opening weekend here in the next couple of days. And of course, the other thing to bear in mind is that Sony still has very lucrative post-theatrical contracts with companies like Netflix, who pay them billions of dollars over the course of years to get their whole catalog put exclusively onto Netflix, which of course has global distribution in many international countries. So because of Sony's business decisions, it's not like this movie has to make a whole ton of profit at the box office, because Sony is going to do a bunch of business after the theater with real outside third-party revenues, and that's something the Walt Disney Company has given up almost entirely at this point. And speaking of Disney and weekend projections, this is from Box Office Pro. You can see here they've got the Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse up at the 115 range. That may actually happen, although I think that might be a tad high. I think this movie is probably going to come in somewhere right around 100 to maybe 110 million. If it exceeds that tremendously, that would be great for this film. I don't know if it's quite there yet. It may be, and part of the problem is we don't know how front-loaded this box office run is. So, for example, this movie still could conclude at $200 million, similar to the first one. It's just that everybody's showing up front this time because they know what to expect. That being said, I actually expect this picture to do even a lot better than the first one. People seem very amped about this, and I wish it the best. But look down here at the number 2 position on this weekend's box office take, and that's Walt Disney Company's The Little Mermaid. Like I mentioned before, This movie doesn't really have any place left to go after the theater. Sure, they'll get some PVOD sales and rentals and maybe a few physical media sales, but as far as third-party licensing is concerned, where the real revenue drivers used to be, Disney's given all that up to put it home on Disney+. And based on these box office numbers, I think that's exactly what a lot of people out there are just waiting for at this point. They're expecting an over 60% drop into the second weekend, and quite frankly, considering how soft the first weekend was for a movie like this, a $250 million production budget, 2.5 times is what they spent to make The Little Mermaid than what they spent to make Spider-Verse. That's going to be a big problem for Disney either way, and it looks like the bulk of Little Mermaid's run is going to be done after this weekend because with Spider-Verse out there, it's going to suck up a lot of the oxygen in the media space, and then we've got Transformers coming out next weekend, which even though it's probably not going to be a big thing here in the U.S., it is going to be a big thing internationally. But as it stands, this is the start for Across the Spider-Verse, the new movie that's opening up today on Friday morning as I'm recording this. $16 million in Thursday previews. $16 million. That is fantastic. Matter of fact, that is second place behind Incredibles 2, which had one of the biggest opening weekends of all time and the biggest opening weekend for an animated feature at about $190 million domestically. You can also see here that's 4.5 times more than the first Spider-Verse movie got in 2018. That's $3.5 million, which they got in 2018 before a $12.6 million Friday and a $35.3 million three-day opening. Now, again, I want to caution everybody, let's not scale that up exactly, although that actually could happen. At a 4.5x over the $35.3 million three-day opening from 2018, that would theoretically extrapolate out this time into almost $160 million opening weekend for Spider-Verse. But that's not going to happen, I don't think. There's an outside chance that we could all be very, very surprised, but as of right now, they're looking at $160 million or so globally for this opening. This was just a domestic figure. And again, this goes back to the conversation I was having earlier with you about how much more front-loaded is this picture than the first one. The first one, people didn't know what to expect. It was good word of mouth that drove audiences. Now they know what they're in for, they're excited for it, and they want to get there early to see this picture. Will that translate into a much bigger box office than the first one? Time will tell. Now, for those wondering, the runtime is a little bit concerning, but of course, this is geared towards a little bit older audience than a normal animated movie you would think of would be, right? I mean, this is Spider-Man. It's not necessarily geared right at the 4, 5, 6-year-olds like you think of a Disney animated show, although we can debate what Disney's products are really geared towards these days. But in this case, this is more of like the teenager crowd. I mean, I've got teenage daughters. They want to see this film. Maybe the runtime of 2 hours and 20 minutes isn't going to be that big of a deal for most of the target audience for this film. I'd hope not. That, and also the fact is a reminder to folks that this is part one of a 2-part series, and the next movie comes out next year in the summer. So it's going to leave a lot of people confused, I think, if they don't know that. But that being said, best wishes on the run of this film. It looks like everybody has really enjoyed this that I've talked to that has seen it. I'm going to try to catch it before the Sunday live show so we can have a discussion then. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you going to check this movie out? Do you care? Do you not care? What do you think the final box office number for this film is going to be? Once we see where the weekend opens up and we have those numbers by Sunday, I'll make my projection on the Sunday afternoon live show. Hope to see everybody there. And until then, take care.